Hello, friends. Tonight, we travel back to a time when the stars didn't just guide your crops, they decided if you lived long enough to eat them. We're diving into the intense, star-soaked, blood-spattered world of the Mayan astronomer. A job that's part NASA scientist, part high priest, part unwilling human sacrifice. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Always wild to see who's watching under what sky. Now, dim the lights. Maybe light a candle, gaze up at the stars, and remember, if you misread the heavens in ancient Mesoamerica, you didn't just get fired, you got flayed. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Daily Duties. Cosmic Calculators in Cotton Loincloths. Welcome to the sacred city of Yaxmutal, deep in the lowland jungles of what we now call Guatemala. The year is somewhere between 700 and 800 CE, but don't bother checking a calendar. The only one that matters is etched in stone and mapped to the stars. The howler monkeys are screaming in the trees. The ceiba trees stretch into the foggy morning like ancient fingers, and you're already late. Because you, dear reader, are the court astronomer, not the fun kind who wears a blazer and talks about Mars on a late-night show. You're the kind who gets woken up at 4 a.m. by a temple aide whispering, "The stars await you, Adjikain." Adjikan. He of the sun. That's your title, not your name. Your actual name has been lost to time, but let's be honest, your job is bigger than your identity. You don't exist to be remembered. You exist to remember them. The gods, the ancestors, the sky. Time is not a line, it's a circle. Mayan time isn't linear, it's circular, repeating, predictable, sacred. Every day isn't just a day, it's a date with history. The position of Venus could mean war. The phase of the moon could determine if the king should pray or prepare to bleed. You're not checking weather forecasts, you're divining fate. That means your days start before the sun. You climb the steep stone steps of the observatory, a squat but magnificent structure whose lines align with celestial events. The structure isn't just architecture, it's an instrument. Light filters through precise gaps. Shadows fall at measured angles. The temple breathes with the sky. You lay out your tools, bark paper codices, a worn jade counting stick, a few smooth stones. Your eyes, trained since boyhood to detect the faintest shift in the heavens, scan the horizon. There's no telescope, no astrolabe, just memory, math, and meaning. You are calculating destiny. Why Venus is more important than you. To us, Venus is a pretty light in the sky. To the Maya, it's a cosmic warning siren. Venus appears as the morning star and the evening star, alternating in cycles that you've tracked for years. Wars are declared based on Venus's appearance. Rituals are timed to its disappearance. The Dresden Codex, one of the only surviving Mayan books, is practically a user manual for Venus tracking. You don't have the luxury of flipping through it. You wrote your own, filled with hand-painted glyphs and red ink made from crushed insects. One wrong glyph, and you don't just mess up a calendar. You potentially doom an entire city to famine, drought, or divine wrath. No pressure. Food is a side quest. You get a bit of ground maize and some hot cacao to keep you alert. Not the sweet kind, this is bitter, gritty, and mixed with chili. The burn helps you focus. You sip it slowly, eyes still on the stars while priests begin to gather at the base of the temple. They're waiting for your reading. This isn't just a morning update. This is your morning trial. Because everything hinges on what you say, the alignment of stars, the behavior of Venus, the whispers of the moon. If you read the sky wrong, the priests will know. The king will know. The gods will definitely know. So you breathe. You check your notes. You double-check the eastward shadow crawling along the temple's lip. You begin to speak, announcing the day to the divine. You don't just say, "Hey, it's Tuesday." You declare the day with full ceremonial weight. It is 8 Khan, under the sign of the crocodile, sacred to the east. Venus has entered the 3rd phase. Blood will be offered. The gods will be pleased. Every word matters. Every syllable aligns with centuries of recorded sky lore. The scribes are already chiseling your reading into soft limestone. It will be copied, memorized, and relayed to warriors, farmers, and priests across the kingdom. You're not just observing the stars. You're setting the day's intention for a whole civilization. The day has only just begun. The reading is done. The priests nod. The king waves you away, already considering what ceremonies the calendar demands. You descend the temple, your mind still buzzing with astronomical models and glyphs, dancing like fireflies behind your eyes. It's only mid-morning. Soon, you'll be consulting with architects on temple alignments, updating codices, and cross-checking omens with the priesthood. There will be more readings, more calculations, more cacao, and always more stars. Because in the Maya world, the heavens never sleep, and neither do you. The triple calendar grind. All right, let's clear something up right away. Keeping track of time as a Mayan astronomer wasn't just about watching sunsets or guessing when to plant corn. No, your job was to babysit the universe's most complicated calendar system without the help of a notebook, let alone a calculator. You were the walking, chanting, occasionally panicking central processor of a cosmic data network that ran 3 sacred calendars at once. And if you messed up, people didn't just reschedule their appointments. They questioned reality, got cursed by gods, or started sharpening obsidian blades with your name on them. So before you complain about syncing your work and personal Google calendars, imagine being responsible for the sacred pulse of time itself, and not being allowed a single day off. First, the Tzolk'in, the sacred mashup of numbers and spirit animals. Imagine a calendar that repeats every 260 days, but instead of months or weeks, you've got a mystical gear system of 20 named days and 13 numbers cycling through each other in a cosmic dance choreographed by gods with no patience for slackers. Each day in this Tzolk'in combo pack doesn't just say it's Thursday. It screams it's Elevenik, day of the wind god, a great day for prophecies, bad for marriages, and absolutely cursed for planting squash. You've memorized every permutation, not because you want to, but because your continued employment and survival depends on knowing what kind of spiritual chaos comes with 7 Khan. It's not trivia. It's logistics for life and death. You don't get to say, "I'll check." You either know it, or someone else is holding your codex while the priests decide what kind of ceremony should replace you. The Tzolk'in isn't a calendar. It's a daily riddle posed by the gods, and your job is to solve it before breakfast. Then comes the Hob, 365 days of slightly more sanity. If the Tzolk'in is the spiritual hotline to the divine, the Hob is your no-nonsense farming calendar, sort of. It's 18 months of 20 days each, followed by a bonus 5-day stretch known as Wayeb, which is ancient Mayan for 5 days of hell. During Wayeb, the barriers between realms thin like bad soup. Ghosts walk, gods sulk, and everyone stays indoors hoping their roof doesn't cave in out of supernatural spite. You're not just tracking sunlight, you're managing public hysteria. This is the calendar people live by. When to plant maize, when the rainy season starts, when to begin brewing the ceremonial beer. And you, O keeper of the glyphs, are expected to line this up perfectly with the spiritual chaos of the Tzolk'in, because if the maize planting overlaps with a day sacred to the god of decay, that's not just bad luck. It's an open invitation for blight, death, or at the very least awkward glances from every priest in the palace. And then, there's the long count. Time, but make it apocalypse. Now, let's throw in the long count calendar. This isn't your basic yearly planner. It tracks all time, back through mythical ages, forward toward an ending so significant it survived into 21st century hysteria. The long count is like the operating system behind the Mayan matrix. It tracks Bactans, about 394 years each, Gatans, Tuns, Winals, and Keens, in a nested series of time-measuring madness that makes your head hurt faster than fermented cacao. Each major time unit rollover isn't just a milestone, it's a cosmic event. Cities might be abandoned. Gods might get restless. The world might metaphorically or literally end. Your job is to know when the last one happened, when the next one is due, and how many sacrifices need to be scheduled in the meantime. Mess it up, and the scribes will carve your failure into stone. That's forever. All three, all the time, all together. Here's where your life turns from difficult to deranged. All three calendars run simultaneously. That means today might be 8 Manik in the Tzolk'in, 17 Yakin in the Hab, and 9.1810001 in the long count. You can't just remember one. You need to remember how they interlock. Because every ritual, every harvest, every political declaration needs to be timed when the calendars align like a cosmic key turning in a divine lock. If they don't, the gods notice. So when someone says, "When should we crown the new king?" they don't want your opinion. They want you to crawl into your cave of codices and come out with a date so astrologically perfect, even the thunder god won't complain. You, the living calendar app with no update option. You're not just an astronomer. You're a living, breathing bridge between cosmic order and earthly chaos. You don't sleep well. You dream in glyphs. Your social life is mostly people demanding auspicious days for their weddings and sacrifices. The closest you get to vacation is standing in the plaza during Wayeb and trying not to inhale too many demons. You are the reason the city still functions. You're the one the priests consult before war, the farmers consult before planting, and the king consults before naming his next heir. But when the stars don't align, when the drought lasts too long, when the people panic, they don't blame the gods, they blame you. Because in the world of the Maya, time isn't just sacred, it's alive, merciless, and deeply, disturbingly punctual. And your only job, don't be late. Tools of the divine trade. Let's talk gear. Not swords or shields or whatever trinket merchants try to sell with fake obsidian polish, but the sacred soot-streaked, sweat-soaked tools of your particular madness. You, after all, are not just a calendar whisperer. You are a craftsman of cosmic insight, a mortal with the job of measuring immortality, and your workshop is a temple, your lab a jungle-shrouded observatory that smells faintly of ash, wet limestone, and panic. So no, you don't have telescopes, you don't have ink cartridges, you don't even have decent light unless the gods are feeling generous with the moon that night. But what you do have, it's functional, it's precise, and it's been handed down for generations by men who wore the same expression you wear now, the one that says, "If I blink at the wrong star, someone loses a head." The temple that watches the sky. First, there's your observatory. Don't picture a tower with a shiny brass dome. Think, thick stone walls arranged like a sundial on ceremonial steroids, carved not for beauty, but for exactitude. Light passes through slots only during solstices. Shadows fall across glyphs in predictable patterns, unless you miscalculated, in which case, congratulations, you've accidentally foretold doom during a rain festival. The whole thing is built like a sacred calendar you can walk inside. It groans when it rains. It howls when the wind shifts. And you know every inch of it better than your own family. Because it doesn't just house your work, it is your work. The way the light filters through the side chamber at dawn. That tells you when Venus is about to vanish. The way the stones sweat in the humidity. That's your passive weather forecasting system. Primitive, maybe. Effective, absolutely. And terrifyingly unforgiving. The codices. Sacred paper cuts from the gods. Next up, the codices. These are your ancient data logs, your doomsday scrolls, your papery panic diaries. Made of bark paper and folded accordion style like some divine pop-up book of existential dread, they're filled with glyphs so intricate it takes a decade just to not mess them up, and another decade to start pretending you know what they mean. You don't get to just doodle in these. You make ink from crushed insects. You chew on charcoal sticks for shading. Your red pigment, that's cochineal bugs, ground into powder and mixed with holy water, or sweat, depending on your budget. And each line, it matters. Each glyph, each curve, is a word to the gods. Misplace a dot or misspell a name, and you might accidentally reschedule the end of the world. You've seen it happen. Well, not the end of the world, but the bit where the priests start looking at you like your head might look nice rolling down a temple staircase. Yeah, that happens. The counting system that hates you. Let's not forget your math tools. You have no abacus. What you do have is a base 20 counting system that makes you long for the sweet simplicity of modern spreadsheets. You use jade counters, carved shells, and rows of stones that look suspiciously like the same ones you tripped over on the way in. Your fingers are your first calculator. Your memory is your hard drive. Your backup system? Hope and a second opinion from the old guy with a bone flute who remembers the last eclipse. And when you count with purpose. Days until Venus returns. Days since the last sacrifice. Days until the king's coronation must align with the blood moon, or else someone gets flayed. Your job isn't just math. It's prophetic arithmetic. And it only works if you breathe at the right moment and blink in rhythm with the gods. Observation, the old-fashioned way. How do you track the heavens without a lens? You look, you stare. You burn patterns into your retinas until you can sketch constellations with your eyes closed and feel time passing in your bones. You lie on your back atop cold stone, watching stars dance across the sky while mosquitoes treat you like a ceremonial buffet. You know the difference between a stationary star and a wandering planet, not because someone told you, but because you've spent 15 years watching them. You count how long Venus disappears. You map the moon's face like a cartographer who hates sleep. You wait for eclipses with the patience of someone whose career depends on getting 5 minutes of shadow right. And when it comes, you scribble, you whisper, you pray. Because observation isn't about seeing. It's about knowing. And knowing can get you praised, or it can get you sacrificed. Often both. Your toolkit, your burden. So, what do you actually carry? A bundle of codices tied with string. A pouch of shells and polished pebbles. A chipped stylus made from bird bone. A ritual knife. No, not for others, for you, just in case. And tucked somewhere deep in your tunic? A backup scroll in case your apprentice spills cacao on the original. These are not tools of convenience. They are responsibilities. And each one weighs as much as your sleepless nights, your aching spine, and your creeping suspicion that the stars are laughing at you. because they are. The astronomer's authority. In the sacred hierarchy of Mayan society, where priests spoke for the gods and kings claimed to be gods, you, the astronomer, sat in a strange, precarious space between reverence and expendability. You weren't royal, but you dined with those who were. You weren't divine, but you were expected to interpret the whims of divinity. You didn't wear a crown, but when your voice echoed off the temple walls, cities listened. Well, until they didn't. Let's be clear, you were important. But importance in the Maya world was a double-edged obsidian blade. Beautiful, sharp, and very good at making your life uncomfortable if things went even slightly off script. You held influence, sure, but it was the kind that came with ritual scrutiny, political pressure, and the ever-looming possibility of being promoted from respected consultant to ceremonial offering. You spoke, and kings delayed wars. Your word could shift schedules, delay battles, or green-light ceremonies that took months to prepare. If you said Venus wasn't in position, armies stood down. If you declared the gods were displeased, priests scrambled to burn more incense, summon more dancers, bleed more nobles. Your voice shaped the kingdom's rhythm, and that made you terrifying. Not in the sword-wielding, crowd-commanding, war-chanting way, but in the quieter, more insidious way of someone who could casually mention a bad alignment and suddenly have the entire palace breathing through clenched teeth. When the king consulted you before a coronation or a campaign, it wasn't small talk. It was strategy. It was risk management. You weren't just interpreting the stars, you were advising on how not to offend the architecture of reality. If you said, "Now is not the time," then now became a cosmic no-fly zone. Priests feared you more than they admitted. The high priests claimed to be the voice of the gods, but you were the one with the receipts. You had the glyphs, the cycles, the codices. When a priest promised that a ritual would guarantee a good harvest, he was really hoping you'd find an alignment to back him up. And if you didn't? Oh, suddenly it was, "The gods are mysterious," and you were getting side-eyed like you'd brought a cursed rabbit into the council chamber. You were both threat and tool. They needed your expertise, but they never fully trusted it. Because power that doesn't kneel makes people nervous. And your only allegiance was to the sky, which, if we're honest, wasn't exactly the most stable employer. You weren't a prophet. You were worse. Prophets get visions. They scream things about blood rivers and divine vengeance and then retreat into caves. You have to explain the visions, justify them, quantify them using mathematical models no one else understands but everyone wants to argue with. You don't get to say, "I just felt it." You have to prove that Mars is angry with charts and calculations and a 3-hour monologue about the last time this happened, which, yes, was 76 years ago but is totally relevant, Your Majesty, if you'll let me finish my sentence. You are a walking contradiction. Revered but questioned. Trusted but watched. Invited to the palace but always expected to bring your own doom insurance. And still, they listened. Despite the suspicion, despite the pressure, when you spoke, the room got quiet. When you raised your hand at a feast, dancers paused mid-step. When you frowned during a royal procession, entire towns held their breath. Because no one wanted to be caught celebrating on a day you'd declared unfit for joy. You wielded time like a blade. Or more precisely, like a flint knife you were expected to hand over if your predictions soured. Every date you chose, every alignment you named, it had weight. It shaped how people lived, how they feared, how they hoped. And sure, they honored you with gifts. Feathered cloaks, carved stools, dinners with the king. But always with a tone of, "Thank you for not dooming us yet." The higher you rise, the longer the drop. The most dangerous thing about authority in your world? It didn't come with tenure, it came with targets. Fail to foresee an eclipse? You were negligent, predict a celestial event that never arrives? You were a fraud. Let the rains fall late 2 years in a row? You were suddenly looking very flammable. Being an authority meant carrying every success like a crown, and every error like a countdown. You had no apprentices lined up to inherit your post, no protection from the tides of favor. Your credibility was measured not in knowledge, but in how often you could bend time to match the needs of men who thought themselves gods. You held the ear of the king, but you also knew what happened when the king got bored. Your throne was a tightrope, so you stood tall in your embroidered tunic, surrounded by the scribes, the priests, the warriors who smirked at your skinny frame and ink-stained fingers. You walked the temple steps like a man certain of his place, because certainty was half the job. The rest was prayer, precision, and the ability to smile when your calculations said disaster, but your audience demanded prosperity. You weren't powerful because you shouted. You were powerful because you whispered and people listened. Because in a world where the gods dictated the tides of life, you were the only one who could read their calendar, and as long as you were right, you were safe. When Venus sneezes. Venus, bright, beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. You'd think a celestial body that looks like a friendly flashlight in the sky would be a source of comfort. But to you, the Mayan astronomer perched nervously atop a weathered stone observatory. Venus is not a friend. Venus is your boss. A fiery, judgmental supervisor with the power to wreck civilizations and get you personally demoted from court advisor to ceremonial kindling in one bad cycle. Because Venus doesn't just appear and disappear in the sky, it vanishes. And when it does, the Maya don't think, "Oh, how interesting, retrograde motion." Number. They think, the gods are angry, the world is ending, and somebody better explain this right now. Guess who that somebody is? The morning star with an attitude problem. You see, Venus rises just before dawn, and then disappears for days or even weeks at a time. And when it reappears, entire kingdoms hold their breath. Wars are declared, ceremonies begin, people get sacrificed. Venus is the cosmic drumbeat of the calendar. Its rise and fall mapped obsessively, feared deeply, and misunderstood just enough to make your life interesting in all the worst ways. The priests demand predictions. The king wants assurances. The people want to sleep through the night without hearing the phrase divine vengeance whispered over their maize fields. But the skies don't care about politics. Venus doesn't ask for permission. It moves when it moves, and if your math is even slightly off, you get the full weight of a civilization's paranoia on your shoulders. And your shoulders, while noble and scholastically trained, are not built for bearing cosmic wrath. You counted the days. Did you count them right? The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Mayan books, contains hundreds of Venus cycles, meticulously tracked and terrifyingly precise. You've copied these charts, memorized their intervals, and watched the skies like a lovesick hawk. You know that Venus disappears for 8 days, or 9, or maybe 12, depending on where you're standing and how drunk the weather is. You don't get a margin of error. You get a spear through the ribs if you're wrong during a coronation. Your task is to count the number of days Venus is invisible, calculate when it will return, and prepare the city for the consequences. Because this isn't just astronomy. This is prophecy with a stopwatch. You don't get to shrug and say, "Oops, cloudy night." You get to explain why a celestial being failed to appear at the party you RSVP'd it to. When Venus goes missing, so might you. And heaven help you if Venus is late. You declare its return, and then nothing. No sparkle on the horizon, no divine guest arriving fashionably on time. Just crickets. Crickets and a very long silence from the crowd gathered for your flawless astronomical insight. That's the moment you feel your stomach twist. Because now every noble in the plaza is wondering if they brought the wrong offerings, or worse, if you brought the wrong date. The high priest frowns. The king shifts in his seat. You smile, but your soul is halfway down the temple steps, already sprinting toward the jungle. Because an astronomer who miscalculates Venus doesn't just lose face. He risks becoming the next blood-smudged footnote in a very detailed codex about how not to anger the gods. The pressure is relentless, and the stars are smug. Venus doesn't care that you haven't slept in 3 nights. Venus doesn't care that your ink ran out, that your apprentice mixed the wrong bug juice into the red paint, or that your observatory was leaking during the last storm. Venus does not care. It shines, disappears, and returns when it chooses. But everyone else, they really care. They care that the calendar matches the heavens, that the wars start on time, that the sacrificial calendar aligns with celestial approval, and you're the buffer between their expectations and the indifference of the universe. You can't scream, you can't panic, you just recalculate. In public, while everyone watches, the goddess with a knife behind her back. To the Maya, Venus isn't a planet, she's a goddess, and not the kind who gently blesses your children and makes your crops grow. She's the kind who appears at dawn with blood on her hands and a message that says, "Try me." She's associated with war, with omens, with transitions between life and death. And while that makes her incredibly useful for keeping people in line, it also means you, the guy with the counting stick and the headache, are stuck decoding the cryptic tantrums of a divine figure with a flair for cosmic drama. Every time she rises, someone's fate hangs in the balance. And every time she doesn't, yours does. The sky never waits. There's no forgiveness in your profession. The stars don't pause while you scratch your head. The moon doesn't wait for you to finish your sentence. Venus definitely doesn't double-check your math. So you rise early, you chart, you predict, you correct, you explain, you justify, you survive. And when Venus finally reappears, just a sliver of white fire on the edge of the horizon, you breathe. Not because you were wrong, but because this time you were right just long enough to see another sunrise. Whispers from the heavens. You don't just read the stars, you listen to them. Or, more accurately, you interpret the deafening silence of burning gas light years away, and then pretend it whispered something useful. That's your job, that's your burden. Because when people look at the sky, they see twinkling lights. When you look at the sky, you see omens, patterns, dates, divine agendas, and sometimes, very unfortunately, a scheduling conflict between a bloodletting ceremony and a surprise eclipse. The stars don't talk, but if they did, they'd sound like a choir of judgmental ancestors waiting to see if you're going to screw up the count. Again. Not all. Omens wear name tags. Every flicker in the night sky, every curve of the moon's face, every wandering point of light is a potential message from the gods. And your job is to tell everyone what those messages mean, even when the gods are feeling cryptic, sarcastic, or downright incoherent. This is not fortune-telling. This is a cosmic feedback loop where your city's fate hangs on, whether that thing you saw last night was Mars going retrograde or just a weirdly bright mosquito in your peripheral vision. The people want clarity. The king wants reassurance. And you want 6 uninterrupted hours of sleep and a hot drink that hasn't been consecrated in someone else's blood. Instead, you get torches in your face and a high priest asking if the triple conjunction means the maize harvest will be late. You want to say, probably. What you say is, it depends on how the rain gods respond to this generous offering of jade and incense. Your words are echoes, not answers. You don't invent prophecy, you decode it. Or at least, that's what you tell yourself as you flip through a codex so fragile it crumbles when you sneeze too hard. You've memorized the glyphs, the gods, the repeating celestial cycles that whisper their wisdom in time, signatures only you can dance to. Sometimes you get it right. The eclipse arrives when you say it would. The moon looks angry, just like you predicted. People celebrate, cheer, bring you offerings, maybe even carve your name into a lintel, unless they misspell it. But sometimes you hesitate. The shadow comes too early. The conjunction fades. The god's voice, if it ever spoke, is drowned out by birdsong or storm wind, or the sound of your own heart realizing that this might be the moment your credibility leaps off the observatory ledge. Your voice is the city's pulse. You speak and the gears of the city move. Markets open or close. Marriages proceed or pause. War councils sharpen their spears or cancel the whole campaign, all based on how you describe a glowing rock's position in the sky. You tell them that the gods approve. You tell them that the rains will come. You tell them that tonight is not a night for singing. And no one ever asks how you know. They just assume you do. Because if you don't, well, no one wants to think about that. Certainly not you. Faith is a two-way street paved with sharp rocks. The people believe in the gods. The gods, supposedly, believe in the people. And the people, they believe in you. That's a lot of belief stacked on top of a guy who just wants to check the moon phases without a crowd breathing down his neck. Your predictions aren't just observations, they're social contracts. If you say the gods are smiling, people stop worrying. If you say the gods are frowning, people start preparing to cry or bleed or both. And sometimes, just sometimes, you wonder what would happen if you lied. Just a little. Just to make the priest smile. Just to delay the king's next question. Just to buy yourself a moment of peace. But you don't. Not because you're noble, because you're terrified. The stars may not talk, but they definitely tattle. You are the translator of the infinite. At the end of the day, or more often, the middle of the night, you return to the top of your stone platform and look up. Not because someone told you to, not because it's on the ritual schedule, but because you can't help it. You stare at the stars and listen for patterns. You tilt your head, blink against the wind, whisper back at the night. And in those moments when no one's watching, when the temple is quiet and the fireflies outnumber the questions, you almost believe they're speaking. Not in words, not in glyphs, but in rhythm. And you, poor brilliant astronomer, are the only one cursed to understand the beat. Chapter 2. Astronomical Mistakes. Oops, there goes the sun. Being a Mayan astronomer isn't just about studying the sky, it's about surviving it. You're not simply charting stars and scribbling glyphs in the quiet glow of moonlight. You're walking a razor-thin line strung between divine expectations and human impatience. And unlike a tightrope walker, you don't have a net. You have a city full of people, a temple full of priests, and a king who thinks late eclipses are a personal insult. Welcome to the part of your job where one miscalculation doesn't just make you look bad, it invites cosmic wrath, and possibly an enthusiastic group of sacrificial priests into your social calendar. A balancing act where the sky tips first. There's a reason you don't sleep much. The heavens never stop spinning. The moon waxes, wanes, disappears, then comes back like an emotional guest star in a never-ending cosmic soap opera. Venus rises, disappears, reappears, and every time she does, people want explanations. The sun? Predictable. The rest? Vindictive artists with terrible timing. You balance them all. Celestial cycles, ritual timing, agricultural planning, royal birthdays, and the occasional inexplicable rain of frogs. Every one of those requires astronomical guidance. And by guidance, they mean unquestionable, correct, and delivered before breakfast. When you suggest delaying a sacrifice because the omens are off, no one says thank you. They say, why are the omens off? As if you had the audacity to personally realign the moon for drama. You don't just walk the line, you measure it. Let's say Venus is about to rise. You've calculated its appearance down to the hour. You've spent weeks prepping, watching the skies, cross-referencing codices so delicate they flake if you breathe near them. You've endured priests breathing over your shoulder, apprentices spilling ink, and the wind attempting to erase your sand-drawn diagrams mid-lecture. Then, on the big day, clouds roll in. Not a little mist, not an aesthetic wisp, a full, furious monsoon front. Venus vanishes behind the sky's temper tantrum, and now you have to tell the king that the divine schedule is running late. Again. You try to explain it's just weather. The king hears divine betrayal. You suggest patience. The priest hears you don't believe enough. You propose a recalibration. The warriors start sharpening things. This is the tightrope, science versus faith. You walk it with a handful of jade counters, a codex held together by humidity and hope, and the sickening awareness that falling doesn't mean failure. It means extinction. The pressure builds from the ground up. People assume the stress of your job comes from the heavens, but it doesn't. It comes from the ground, from the ones who listen, nod, and then place unrealistic expectations on your very mortal shoulders. Farmers want the right date to plant. They don't care about star phases. They want rain. Now, merchants want lucky days for trade expeditions. They want success, not stories. And the nobility. They want events to match astrology so perfectly that even the gods feel flattered. When things go well, you're celebrated. Feathered cloaks, sweet drinks, maybe even a song. When things go wrong, no one blames the gods, no one blames the weather. They blame the guy who said, it's safe to march under this moon. That's you. You don't predict, you perform. You're not issuing cold data. You're delivering reassurance. You're calming nerves, soothing egos, and doing it all with a voice that better not shake. Because if it does, so does the city's faith. You read from your codex like it's scripture. You point to stars like they're jury members. You speak with confidence even when you're 60% sure and 100% exhausted. Because a confident mistake is safer than an honest shrug. And sometimes you wonder, late at night, whether you've become more actor than astronomer, whether the ritual robes are for the gods, or just to distract the crowd from your bloodshot eyes and quietly trembling hands. Everyone wants you to be right until you are. It's a strange thing. They fear your predictions, but they need them. They want you to be right. Unless right means drought, delay, or death. Then they want you to be quiet. You can feel the tension in every consultation, every ceremony. Tell us the truth, they say, unless the truth is inconvenient. Tell us what the stars say, unless the stars are shouting. Tell us the gods are happy. Even if the sky is bleeding, you walk the line, carefully, constantly, convincingly, and if you slip, well, gravity isn't just a law of physics. In your world, it's divine judgment with altitude. The eclipse incident. Let's talk about the day the sky chose to ignore you. It began like every other significant moment in your career, with a stomachache and a city full of people expecting the universe to cooperate. You had done the math, checked the codices, watched the stars until your eyes burned. You knew the eclipse was coming. The numbers had whispered it, the glyphs had sung it, even your dreams had started aligning with shadow and light. This was supposed to be your triumph. So you made the call, declared the date, notified the palace. The king scheduled a feast. The priests prepared a chant. And you climbed the temple steps with the kind of cautious confidence that comes only from the hope that this time the sky might actually listen. The sun wasn't listening. At first, the crowd was electric. People gathered in the plaza with the reverence reserved for miracles and midsummer festivals. The scribes were prepped, obsidian tips poised over clay. Musicians played their slow, breathy flutes. And you stood there, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the sky like a man waiting for a god to wink. But the sun just stayed. No eclipse, no shadow, no signal from the heavens. Just an uninterrupted, blazing sphere of heat, radiating disinterest. You smiled. That tight, desperate smile scholars wear when their research paper just caught fire. You whispered something about atmospheric distortions. Everyone heard the word distortions, but no one liked how it sounded. The high priest narrowed his eyes. The king shifted in his carved seat, and the crowd, once buzzing with anticipation, began to hum with discomfort. You watched your status erode in real time. It didn't take long. You could feel the trust draining from the plaza like rain evaporating off hot stone. Farmers exchanged glances. Nobles adjusted their jewelry with forced indifference. One of your apprentices began quietly collecting your tools, the way one might pack up after a funeral that arrived early. The high priest approached. His tone was gentle, but his eyes were already planning your replacement. "Are you sure?" he asked, as if the answer would change anything. Perhaps you misread the codex? You wanted to scream, to point at the moon, to drag everyone up the observatory and show them the sky through your eyes. But you didn't, because no one wanted an explanation. They wanted a shadow, they wanted proof, and the sky had chosen not to deliver. The blame didn't need a name. No one said you failed, not aloud, but failure doesn't always need a verdict. It settles in the space between glances. It trails you like incense smoke. It appears when scribes stop recording your words, when guards stop announcing your presence, when meals stop being sent to your chamber on time. You weren't punished, not officially, but you were also not trusted. Not entirely, not anymore. The king rescheduled the feast. The high priest adjusted the calendar. And your prediction, which had once been a declaration, became a footnote, something spoken about in past tense with the gentle condescension reserved for the formerly important. When the eclipse finally came, 2 days later, the sky went dark. It was beautiful, absolute, terrifying in its perfection. You watched it alone from the edge of the jungle, not because you were banished, but because no one had invited you back. You didn't record it, you didn't announce it. You just stood there, soaking in the silence. The triumph turned tragedy, the celestial event that proved your math was right, too late to matter. Because being right in your profession isn't about accuracy. It's about timing. You don't get credit for truth after the drums have stopped beating. You get forgotten. Signs, symbols, and suspicion. It begins with a whisper, not from the stars, but from the people. A sideways glance from a priest, a pause in the king's tone. A nobleman who thanks you too quickly for your prediction. You've seen this before, the beginning of unraveling. Not the kind you can measure in cycles, but the kind that settles in your skin like humidity. It clings, weighs, warns. The glyphs don't look the same. You open your codices, but they don't feel like old friends. They feel like witnesses, silent, staring, and increasingly reluctant to be associated with your predictions. You trace the symbols, each curl, each dot. But now, instead of divination, you hear accusation. You said the eclipse would come. You promised the gods were watching. You failed to see the truth. You haven't changed the ink, but the ink has changed you. The city starts, reading you. It's not just the stars anymore, it's you. You stand too still during a ceremony and someone writes it down as a bad sign. You leave a sentence unfinished during a reading, and it becomes a divine pause. You sneeze mid-ritual and accidentally foretell a minor plague. You're not the interpreter now. You're the interpretation. They assign meaning to your posture, your tone, the direction you face when you speak. You used to explain the gods. Now you're expected to reflect them. Perfectly, constantly, without flaw. One mistake, one shrug, one errant breath, and suddenly you're not a scholar, you're a symbol of uncertainty. Prophecy gets political. It creeps in slowly. A high priest asks you to adjust a reading so the festival doesn't overlap with a rival clan ceremony. A noble suggests that the current alignment might be favorable to trade, if you just look at it slightly differently. You say nothing, you say everything. Because now every word is strategic, every omission a statement. Your truth is no longer sacred, it's negotiable, and you are no longer a vessel of celestial truth. You are a pawn in a game with rules no one will write down. You still look up. At night, when the city sleeps and the ceremonial fires dim, you return to your platform. You scan the stars, not for answers, but for relief. You remember why you began, the wonder, the silence, the clarity that used to feel like truth. And though you are tired, cautious, and half a step from exile, you still lift your eyes. You still trust the stars. Because if there is any voice left that isn't trying to control you, it's theirs. The king's displeasure. You always knew the king wasn't really your friend. He was gracious, he was polite. He invited you to banquets and laughed, politely, at your jokes about lunar cycles and ceremonial scheduling mishaps. But it was always clear that he didn't laugh because he thought you were funny. He laughed because you were useful, because your predictions made him look like a man favored by the gods, until they didn't. A throne built on timing. Royalty, especially the feathered, sun-gilded variety that commands armies and oversees sacrifices, needs certainty. Kings are not fond of mystery, they do not like surprises, and they hate looking unprepared in front of their rivals. That's where you came in. High priest of patterns, whisperer of Venus cycles, unofficial chief of divine public relations. You gave him the illusion of control. You told him what the gods would do and when they'd do it. He used your readings to time announcements, summon envoys, schedule feasts, and plan wars. And as long as the stars obeyed your voice, the king believed you were indispensable. When favor turns. But now the sky has made a fool of you, and by extension, it's made a fool of him. The eclipse didn't come, the sacrifice didn't sink. The crowd murmured, the nobles whispered. He didn't shout, he didn't punish, he didn't need to. A single delay in eye contact was enough. One missed invitation. A new advisor suddenly seated closer during the feast. That was how kings expressed displeasure. through edits to the script of your life. And now you find yourself speaking a little less often. Your insights requested only after the council has already met. Your codex consulted after the decision's been made. You're still in the room, but not in the circle. There's a specific chill that settles when you're technically still in power, but everyone's stopped listening. They nod while you speak. They thank you for your input. But you see the way they avoid your gaze, the way your words are never repeated, never cited, never carved into stone. Once, the king asked you to bless his campaigns. Now he asks the high priest if the weather looks good for battle. You haven't lost your position. You've lost your momentum. And in court politics, those two are practically the same. The court is a jungle with better jewelry. It's not that the king wants you gone. He just wants a version of you that doesn't make him look mortal. And in this game, mortality is contagious. Your rivals smell blood, not yours, his, but you're the weaker link. So they circle you. They mention minor inaccuracies in your past readings. They float the idea that your codices might be outdated. One even gifts the king a more accurate lunar chart as a polite insult wrapped in bark paper. The king doesn't object. He smiles. And that's worse. You were never irreplaceable. You told yourself you were vital. You believed that, without your knowledge, the court would collapse into chaos. But now you see how quickly others step into the vacuum, how smoothly the rituals proceed, how easily your absence is filled with younger, more confident voices repeating your words as if they were their own. The king hasn't dismissed you. That would make too much noise. Instead, he lets you linger, slowly fading from the edge of his shadow. Still, you stay. You stay because the stars haven't betrayed you. The sky still speaks. The patterns still make sense even if the people no longer want to hear them. You sit alone in your observatory and count the days until Venus rises again. Not because it will restore your position, but because the work still matters. Because someone should still be listening, even when no one else is. Scapegoats and feathers. The thing about divine wrath is that someone always has to explain it. And if it can't be explained, it has to be absorbed, preferably by someone expendable, influential, and just distant enough from the throne to be sacrificed without too much paperwork. Congratulations, that's you. The city needs a narrative. The eclipse was late, the crops are underperforming. A noble child fell ill, and 3 temple birds refused their morning fruit. The people are uneasy, and unease is dangerous. It makes them look around for patterns, for signs, for a face they can attach to the sense that something is out of sync, and that face is increasingly yours. You were the one who told them when to plant, when to pray, when to bleed. You were the one who spoke for the sky. So when the sky starts acting up, it's only logical that someone wonders whether you've fallen out of favor. Not the gods, you. Whispers turn to chants. It begins subtly. Someone references the last unfortunate misalignment. Another mentions a story they heard about a former court seer who stopped hearing the heavens and started inventing them. These are not accusations, not formally, but they ripple through the palace like smoke from a ritual fire. Then someone cites an omen that wasn't yours, a reading you didn't make. But your name is attached to it anyway, because it's easier to blame one man than admit that maybe the gods are just being difficult. Soon, a priest publicly questions one of your charts during a ceremony. A noble laughs a little too loudly when your name is mentioned. The king doesn't look at you when the stars are discussed. And just like that, your shadow begins to shrink. The costume of guilt. You still wear your feathers. Still walk the temple steps. Still deliver your readings. But now, everything feels heavier. Each glyph you read carries an edge. Each sentence you speak is dissected. Your ceremonial garments, once symbols of knowledge and grace, now look too ornate, too presumptive. Like you're trying too hard to look like someone still in favor. It's subtle the way a scapegoat is chosen. There's no public decree, just a slow rearranging of glances, a shift in posture, a question asked just a bit too loud. Didn't he predict rain last week? You did. The rain didn't come. Everyone smells the smoke. You know how this ends. You've seen it before. An advisor grows too confident. A priest gets too many things wrong. A noble fails to appease the right god. They don't vanish, not immediately, but their stories grow quieter. Their names fall out of prayers. Their faces stop appearing in murals. And then one day, during a ceremony, someone steps forward. Someone important, and says something like, "For the balance to be restored, an offering must be made." And everyone nods. And no one says your name. But everyone knows it. You try to act normal. You perform the rituals. You recite the cycles. You prepare a new reading, hoping it will land like truth instead of desperation. Maybe if the stars align, if the gods behave, if the prediction is just right, maybe then the tide will shift. It won't, because the city doesn't need accuracy now. It needs reassurance. It needs to see the gods pleased again. And it needs someone to hold up to the sky and say, "See? We found the flaw. We fixed it." It needs a sacrifice. And you're already wearing the feathers. The road to ritual blame. No one says the word sacrifice out loud, not at first. It's too final, too real. It implies a decision has been made. And decisions like that aren't made in the open. They gather like storm clouds behind silk curtains, inevitable, dense, and waiting for someone to pretend they didn't see them coming. The signs appear before the sentence. First, you're asked to step back during a reading. Just for this one ceremony, just a formality, they say. A fresh voice is needed for the equinox. Tradition, they insist. You nod, because that's what you're supposed to do. You smile, because anything else would be too revealing. Then your chamber is relocated. Not far, just down a quieter corridor, further from the observatory, closer to the kitchens, closer to the exits. You're still consulted, but less often. You're still praised, but in the past tense. No one says you were wrong. They say you were valuable, insightful, devoted. That's how you know they're preparing for the end. People don't eulogize the living unless they're rehearsing. Ritual doesn't need justification. When a ceremony must be held to appease the gods, it rarely matters why. The question isn't what went wrong. It's who will pay for it. And you're the most obvious candidate. Visible, recently disfavored, formerly elevated, you were the voice of the stars. Now you're the symbol of dissonance. And the city needs harmony. The drums grow louder each evening. The smoke from incense lasts longer. The priests chant deeper into the night, voices cracking with anticipation or dread. And you're kept just close enough to see it all coming, but too far to stop it. You know the ritual by heart? Of course you do. You wrote half of it. Not directly, but your readings informed it. Your dates aligned the sun with the altars, the moon with the knives. You helped structure the rhythm of sacrifice long before you realized you might dance to it. The procession, the platform, the obsidian blade kissed with holy oil, the chants rising like heat, the silence sharpened like a breath held too long. You know exactly when your name will be spoken. You know how the priest will pronounce it. Low, deliberate, reverent. You know how the crowd will react, quiet but not surprised. Not really. You've seen this moment in your mind too many times not to recognize its shape. They offer you the illusion of dignity. There will be no chains that would dishonor the role you once held. You will walk calmly, bow your head solemnly, accept your fate graciously. They will call it a gift, a final service, a sacred restoration. You will be told that the gods demand balance, not vengeance, that your blood is not punishment, it is punctuation. The end of one chapter, so another may begin, and you will nod, because you understand punctuation. You've been writing it in stone your whole life. The stars still shine. The night before, you return to your observatory. It's empty, no guards, no torches, just you and the sky. You climb the steps slowly, savoring each one. You lay your instruments out for the last time, even though no one is watching. You chart the stars, not because you need to, but because they are still speaking. And you are still listening. You see Venus rising right on time. You smile, because the stars never betrayed you. People did. Chapter 3. Sacrifice Ceremonies, from Stargazer to Chest Opener. Summoned to the temple. There's no formal invitation, no messenger with a scroll, no gilded summons stamped with the seal of the king. Just a priest at your door before dawn, his eyes lowered, his voice flat. They're ready for you. You nod. Of course they are. This is how it begins. The final movement of a life spent staring at the sky. No panic, no protest. Only the inevitability of gravity pulling a falling star to the earth. The path is familiar, but everything feels strange. The temple steps are the same ones you've climbed every day for years, but today your feet drag. Not because of fear, not entirely, but because every stone seems to resist you, like the structure itself knows what's coming and would rather not be involved. The plaza below is quiet, not empty, just subdued. People aren't shouting, they're whispering, watching. You recognize the look on their faces. It's not hatred, it's something worse, it's relief. Because if you're the one summoned, they aren't, not today. You walk like a priest, not a prisoner. That's part of the performance. You straighten your robes, keep your hands visible. You bow to the statues, nod to the guards, make eye contact with the scribes. Every move is deliberate, because this isn't just a procession, it's a narrative. You're not being dragged, you're walking willingly. That matters, not for your sake, for theirs. The city needs to believe that this is right, that the gods are being honored, not appeased, that balance is being restored, not purchased. So you give them what they need: dignity, ceremony, a living symbol of submission to divine order. The temple smells like smoke and memory. Inside, the air is thick, not just with incense, but with history. You've spent years in this place, consulting, advising, calculating omens under flickering torchlight. Now, every surface seems to glow with cruel familiarity. There's the wall where you charted the last Venus cycle, the column that casts the shadow for the solstice ceremony, the altar where you once read aloud the glyphs that predicted the king's ascension. You walk past these memories like ghosts. They don't look back. The priests avoid your eyes. They chant. They prepare the offerings. They anoint the blade. But they do not speak to you. Not out of malice, out of protocol. To engage would acknowledge your humanity. And today, you are not a person. You are a vessel, a symbol, a necessary conclusion. Still, one of them hesitates. A young acolyte, barely older than the ink on his skin. He glances up, just once. You nod to him, and he looks away, his face a mask of forced indifference cracking at the edges. You kneel where you once stood. They guide you to the center. The platform is warm from the sun, the stones etched with patterns you helped interpret. You kneel, not because they force you, but because you know your place. You know how this ends. And if you must die, it will be in the same language you lived in, quietly, symbolically, in service to something larger. You bow your head, and somewhere beyond the chants, beyond the eyes of the crowd, beyond the edge of fear, you listen for the stars, the blade and the breath. You hear it before you feel it, the hum of the obsidian edge moving through incense-thick air, the rustle of feathers from the priest's robe, the inhalation of 1,000 witnesses who all somehow breathe as one. Time doesn't stop. It leans. It stretches out like the shadow of a sundial, pausing just long enough to let your thoughts wander to absurd places. Did I mark the last Venus cycle correctly? Will they bother updating my codex? Who will feed the fireflies in my observatory? Then the blade arrives. Pain, then clarity. You expect agony. You expect to thrash, to scream, to curse the sky. But it's quieter than that. A bloom of warmth, a detachment from your own breath, as if you've stepped just slightly to the left of your body. You see the sky, not above you, but within you. The constellations shift, not in chaos, but in rhythm, like they were waiting for this moment. Like you were the final glyph in a sentence the gods had been writing for centuries. You are not screaming. You are not begging. You are becoming. The priest whispers your name, not aloud, not publicly, just once under his breath before the knife completes its arc. A gesture of respect or apology or both. The crowd doesn't hear it. They only hear the drums. They only see the red spilling down the platform, soaking the stones with sacred purpose. But you hear it, that whisper, that last acknowledgement that you were more than the role you played. You were a person. And for a flicker of time, before the smoke swallows your vision, before the stars consume your senses, that is enough. The breath leaves like a prophecy fulfilled. You don't know if it escapes or is taken. You only know it's gone. And what's left is silence, not the silence of failure or punishment or fear, the silence of completion. The ceremony ends not with a cry, but with a breath that echoes back from the heavens like a returning echo. You are not gone. You are aligned. You are the marker of a cycle. The reminder that someone always listens to the stars. After the ashes, you are not there for the aftermath, but you can feel it. Somewhere far below the stars, the platform is washed. The chants resume, though the priests speak more cautiously now, as if aware they've trimmed something too close to divine nerve. The king steps forward, delivering his verdict not with thunder, but with composure honed by ritual. He speaks of order, of balance, of your sacrifice. He does not speak your name. The city exhales, and the sky, as always, remains indifferent. Life fills the space you left. By nightfall, your chamber is quiet, not sealed, not mourned, reassigned. The apprentice whose notes you once corrected now sits at your desk, codex open before him, your ink still faintly staining the corners. He reads aloud with ceremony and caution, carefully pronouncing the glyphs you once spoke by instinct. A new astronomer is announced the next morning. His voice is confident, his robes crisp. He predicts good harvests, safe seasons, clear skies. The crowd nods. They want to believe him, and they do. Because that's the purpose of ritual. It doesn't just fill a void, it erases it. Memory isn't etched, it's echoed. No monument is raised in your honor, no glyph is carved into the temple wall. But your name begins to reappear, not as a title, but as a tale. A merchant swears you warned of drought weeks before the river dried. A healer claims you foresaw the sickness that swept through the East Quarter. Children whisper that Venus once spoke your name during an eclipse, and that the stars blinked in answer. None of these are written, none are confirmed, but they spread like pollen in the wind, drifting, settling, finding root where certainty no longer matters. They remember you not in stone, but in pause, in timing, in the breath between omens, in the gaze that lingers just a little longer on a clear night sky. You became a story, and in a city built on stories, that might be the most enduring role of all. But legacy doesn't linger where you stand. It moves quietly toward the places where you no longer are. A calendar without a keeper. The stars didn't stop spinning when you were gone. The long count continues to tally time, oblivious to the absence of the man who once whispered its secrets aloud. Venus rises again. The moon completes her phases. The gods, if they ever pause to notice, say nothing. But the city notices. The system slows. The new astronomer reads the codices. Yes, but not the way you did. He recites but doesn't hear. He calculates but doesn't feel. There's a hesitation in the ceremonies now, a stiffness that creeps into the margins. No one says it outright, but they sense it. The dates are still correct, but the alignments feel off. Something sacred has shifted by a fraction of a fraction. A noble wedding is delayed due to unexpected omens. A ceremony is rescheduled after an incorrect moon phase is read aloud. The farmers begin planting not with consultation, but by memory, trusting their instincts more than the stars. The calendar is still followed, but no one follows it with faith. The questions return. Whispers begin again, not about the gods, but about the system. Were the readings always this fragile? Did the stars really change, or did the old astronomer just know how to interpret them in ways that made sense? Someone rediscovers your old notes tucked into the folds of a scroll no one meant to open. They find symbols they don't understand. Correlations between cycles that the new astronomer dismisses as unproven. But the scribes linger over them. The priests frown. Someone places a small offering at your old observatory. The king doesn't acknowledge it, but he doesn't remove it either. The world turns without apology. The sun rises, the harvest comes, the rituals continue. No disasters, no cataclysms, just time, flowing as it always has, smooth, unfeeling, unbothered. But that's the thing about systems held together by belief. They don't break with force, they decay with doubt. And the doubt, quiet and careful, has returned. You are gone, but your absence is not empty. It is a question that no one wants to ask aloud. Who watches the sky for the watchers? The cycle continues. Not every story ends when the name is forgotten. Some simply begin again, carried by those who don't yet know they're listening. Somewhere, a child looks up. Not at a codex, not at a priest, not at the fading glyphs on the temple wall, at the stars. They don't know your name, they've never heard your voice, but something stirs in them when they see Venus glow at dawn. A tug, a pull, a quiet alignment deep within the bones. They don't have the words for it, but they will. In time. It begins again, as it always does. The child starts watching the sky. Every night, every morning. They make marks on the wall in charcoal and chalk. They ask questions no one wants to answer. They speak of patterns no one else sees. People laugh at first, then they stop laughing, because the child's predictions come true. Small things: weather shifts, market winds, the right day for birth, the best time to harvest. Whispers begin again, reverent this time. Legacy is not a name, it's a pattern. You are not remembered in stories carved into stone, but your rhythm lives on in the hands of someone who has never met you. Your cycle continues, not in grand ceremonies, but in quiet conviction, in chalk marks, in candlelight, in questions whispered toward the heavens. The stars never stopped speaking. They just needed someone to listen again. Final thoughts. You weren't meant to be remembered. Not in statues, not in stone, not in the roar of a crowd or the chant of 1,000 priests. You were the one who looked up when everyone else looked forward. The one who listened for meaning in silence, who counted the space between shadows because it mattered, and made others believe it might too. And maybe that's enough. You were never the center. You didn't lead armies, you didn't claim divinity, you didn't hold a scepter or sit on a throne. But you moved the world anyway, with timing, with warnings, with the simple, terrifying knowledge that the constellations blink with indifferent precision, even when people do. You translated the eternal, not perfectly, not always clearly, but with faith. That's what they needed. That's what you gave them. And when the faith faltered, when your predictions cracked, when the ceremony turned toward you instead of through you, you didn't run. You walked. You aligned. The work continues, not in your name, not even in your memory, but in the cycle, in the grasp of someone young, with dust-streaked palms and a sky-bound stare, in a scroll reopened, in a symbol re-etched, in the whisper before the chant, because time doesn't stop, and meaning doesn't vanish. It just waits, quietly, patiently, for someone else to lift their head and ask, "What does it mean?" You never had all the answers, but you asked the right questions. And maybe that's why the sky murmured its rhythms to you in the first place. So now, close your eyes. Let the stars whisper their lullabies. Sleep well. You've counted enough days for one lifetime.